Fire Emblem, my second favorite game franchise. There are tons of videos on this series talking about the games, lords, allies, supports, all that good stuff. But what about villains? Surprisingly, this community doesn't talk about the antagonist as much, which is a shame because for me, these villains are half of what makes Fire Emblem so fun to begin with. Whether it's fearsome war criminals, tragic adversaries, or playful psychos, the series finds a way to make them all work in tandem. The classic and modern titles both have widely different approaches with how they handle their villains, with the classic villains being objectively superior since the devs actually treat them well most of the time. As such, there's gonna be more of them to praise in comparison. So I'm gonna be splitting the list in two, covering the classic villains now and the modern ones later. I'll be looking at objective aspects like design, personality, presence, and the type of villain itself, since I do want to factor in as many different ones as I can. But at the same time, bear in mind that I have my own preferences in terms of what villains I usually enjoy. So do be prepared for a hot take or two, but some of you should already know that coming from me. With all that said and done, let's begin the enemy phase. These are my top 15 classic Fire Emblem villains. The Shadow Dragon Saga is responsible for giving us 4 quintessential antagonists that will inspire the archetypes across the series. Garneth, the Dark Puppet Master, Camus, the Noble Enemy, Hardin, the Tragic Conqueror, and Medeus, the Evil Dragon. I could just pick one of these guys for the list, but honestly, I think it's more convenient to cover all 4 of them in one. Even factoring out their influences, they do stand out surprisingly well on their own. Each of them do have strong presence, interesting backstories, and even some character development. Garneth is the arch-villain of the duology, a former student of Godo whose lack of love and compassion led him to a pursuit of power. He revels in how indestructible he is by toying around with Marth, but is also fully aware of what comes above him. As such, he compensates for it, brainwashing Tiki so she can't forge the one weapon that can beat him, sending whole kingdoms into wars to kill any and all competition, and keeping Falchion with him, presumably as insurance against Medeus. He's a legitimately smart and threatening villain with no fluff to show that he is any more than what he needs to be. Pure, unapologetic evil. Camus is the Honorable Knight of Grust, leading the Sable Order fighting under the allied flag of the Dragon Kingdom Dol. He pretty much started the trend of goodwill enemies fighting against the main characters for people they obviously know are evil, whether it's via blackmail, holding hostage, or just stubborn pride. Camus, however, is a bit more interesting than that. Sure, he too is a victim of his own share of circumstances, but he does have the benefit of developing in future games, losing his memories in Valentia and starting anew, as well as returning to Arcania to right his wrongs once his memories came back. Rather than simply being written off as a good guy you had to tragically kill, Camus is painted as the one with error that which he need to amend, so he did manage to be a little more than the archetype that he would later inspire. Hardin is the fan favorite of this batch, a once great ally corrupted into an evil tyrant under Garneth's influence. Now, it's easy to say that he's just a puppet leader with a fake personality, but it's not that simple. Garneth took advantage of Hardin's moment of emotional vulnerability to morph his thoughts. This came from him bottling up all the negative aspects of himself over the years. Jealousy to Marth being entrusted with the Fire Emblem instead of him, and the fact that his own wife Nina didn't even love him and only married him reluctantly. Feeling that he's only used up, he fell to his vice under the Dark Sphere and mowed down Arcania to build an empire of his own, all the while tricking Marth into doing his bidding. Despite being brainwashed, there are key qualities that can be pointed to in his villainy that does show he is more than just a truly noble king. He does have character flaws, and it's what ultimately got him taken advantage of. And lastly, Medeus, an all-powerful earth dragon standing as the greatest obstacle in Marth's journey. Motivated by mankind's prejudice for his kin, Medeus only wishes to watch humans suffer for their weakness. There isn't much more to say about him really. He's the final boss. The main draw comes down to how intimidating and powerful he can be. And okay, while he does look like a living poop in Book 1, Book 2 did give him that sleek, primal dragon look he deserves. While plenty of future villains are more dynamic and interestingly written, there's no shame in looking back to these old pillars. Some of them do have qualities that age well even today, and remind us that there's genuine talent and inspiration behind the series even from way back then. When you're at war with a bunch of dangerous and conniving enemies, you're bound to come across a traitor among your ranks. After all, if you can recruit someone from the opposing team, why can't they do the same? Sacred Stones is home to a particularly notorious traitor hiding among Ephraim's own squad. Alright, let's see. Kyle and Ford. They look too much alike. I wonder what could give them away as the... Oh. Man, and now we're just getting into the mystery. Orson was a former knight of Radanes, aiding Ephraim in the takeover of Castle Renval. And if the oh-so-trustworthy squint isn't a dead enough giveaway, he is later revealed to be the traitor in service of Grado's army, luring Ephraim and Erica into one of Valter's traps. As a reward for his dastardly deeds, he was made king of Radanes, and got to reunite with his wife. Not reunite as in she was held hostage, by the way. She was reanimated from the dead. And it's not sentient! Yeah, let's just say Orson struggles with letting go of past attachments and gives up honor due to his degrading sanity. Leon is aware of this and resurrected his wife for him in exchange for his services.
See how my mustache moves in the wind?
Yeah? Excuse me, I wasn't being a hypocrite. There's a right and wrong way to resurrect. What Orson got himself into is a severe violation of our code. It's not political! Orson is a twisted man, only accepting his position of power to hold himself secure. He couldn't care less about the well-being of Renee's or even his own. All that matters to him is that he is happy with his wife. While his story is a short one, he still manages to be a very chilling villain. The tale of a man who fails to accept death even serves as a fine piece to the puzzle of Leon's scheme. He is one villain whose tragedy we will remember, whether we want to or not. Fire Emblem has quite a few femme fatales in its villain gallery. A lot of them are either despicable beyond compare, girlfriend chemists, or carry their own personal agenda while maintaining certain design perks. One of the best in my opinion is Sonia from Blazing Sword. Being one of Nurgle's morphs, you'd think Sonia will be an emotionless husk who serves as an extension of her master, similar to Ephidel and Limstella. But surprisingly, Sonia turned out to be a bit more than that. She's the only morph to have a personality, being extremely vain and egocentric, regarding herself as a perfect creation because of it. Using her beauty, she seduced Brendan Reed into becoming her husband and taking over the Black Fang. She also doesn't treat her adoptive daughter Nino all too well, given how badly she's neglected and was even ditched as a pawn to assassinate Zephiel. Considering Nurgle ordered Sonia to raise Nino for her magical potential, it's quite telling when she didn't have the patience to put up with Nino and ended up disobeying Nurgle unconditionally. But then again, it makes it all the more earned when you get to see Sonia face the comeuppance of her ego. Whether it's execution by Nurgle or with your own hands, her perfection fittingly set her up for failure. Sonia really stands out as Effie's trademark evil bitch. She's very involved with the story and has a lot of influence even outside of her master's command. She's got all the cards to be a potently hateable villain. The Conqueror villain seems to be the fan favorite archetype across the series. A lot of the reasons being that these are always some of the more humane antagonists. Whether they were starting a war for good intentions, manipulated by the greater evil, or are pushed to villainy due to a depressing background. There's always something for the suckers of tragedy to bask in with these guys, and I'd be lying if I'm not in a similar boat, albeit not as strongly. Since these guys tend to be major villains, I'd definitely prefer that they're in as much control of their actions as possible. That way I can enjoy whatever evil they cause by their own hands, or feel more empathetic for what they will themselves to do despite their morals. In the case of the latter, Regal's Emperor Rudolph passed with flying colors. Rudolph does a lot of things that you'd expect a conqueror to do, mainly starting a war between two nations and employing the services of traitors from the enemy faction. But he does have his reasons. As the lands of Zofia and Regel have grown less rich and the dragon gods have become more insane, Rudolph is aware that change must happen if the people of both nations are ever gonna pick themselves back up. As such, he took it upon himself to draw first blood. He sends his son away, not only to protect him from the Duma faithful, but also to grow within Zofia so that he can vouch for the good in both nations and unite them. When he finally confronts Alm, Rudolph is aware his mission is over. He didn't even so much as draw his blade against Alm, only letting his son defeat him before revealing the truth and passing the fate of Regel onto Alm's hands. One of the things I gotta hand it to Shadows of Valentia is how Celica's premonition builds up Rudolph's confrontation with Alm as a decisive battle, one that would reveal Rudolph as a puppet of Duma. But turns out, no such thing happened. Rudolph was in full control of his actions all along, didn't overstay his welcome, and accepted his fate. Considering Hardin would later pave the trend of brainwashed conquerors, this is pretty refreshing to look back to, and I do wish the series leans into this more often. With all that said, Rudolph is only this low on the list because he doesn't feel as villainous as the other candidates, nor is his character deep enough to justify being that much higher. Still, I really like him, and I'd be remiss if I don't give him the attention he deserves, especially given how often he gets overshadowed by other, more prominent villains in the series. When it comes to main villains, a lot of people usually like theirs to be either complex, tragic figures, or insanely calculative masterminds who's got the whole game right within their palm. But I feel like not a lot of people appreciate the niche of a simple, greedy asshole. Villains that are heavily flawed and not always competent, but asserts a ton of wit and power while going out of their way to be as creative as they can with how much they enjoy being the bad guy. Raidric is one such example. On surface level, Raidric doesn't seem all that great. For being the main villain of Thracia 776, he's just one of the many evil barons you typically encounter across the Jotgirl saga. Rank-wise, not much really sets him apart from a generic mini-boss in Geneaology. But character-wise? Oh man, is he a treat! Raidric is a real slimeball. Not only did he betray Leif's grandfather and get him killed so that Travant can take over North Thracia, but he proceeds to betray Travant as well and turn North Thracia's control to the Granville Empire. Why? He's just greedy. He wants to live a high life in Munster and put his people in abject torture for fun. Of course, he goes out of his way to simp for Veld if it means he can continue to stay in the good graces of the Lopter clan. What makes Raidric really stand out is just how amusing his schemes are. He successfully captured Leif and deprived him of his equipment and allies. Not to mention, he subjected Leif's mentor, Eiffel, into a pit fight right after promising her that he would let her see her daughter Merida. But he's a man of his words, of course, as after Eiffel survived for a while, he does let her see Merida again, brainwashed by a cursed sword and forced to fight her. I also appreciate how intelligent Raidric is. He's not just a mindless asshole who has victory handed over to him on a silver platter, he actually does strategize and research his enemies. So it's not terribly difficult to believe that he will be able to trick people to get what he wants. All the more reason he earned his spot as a major villain. And when you do get to tear that ego open, it's pretty dang cathartic. As fun as Raidric is, I will admit I would have liked to see him interact with Leif more given the personal beef they have with each other. Damn it Thracia, you got rid of support convos, but you gotta take away boss convos too. That and most of his screen time mainly rests on the beginning and the end of the game. He doesn't have an overarching presence all across, but then again, it's best that he doesn't get too overbearing. Screen time doesn't always accommodate for depth if Awakening and Fates were anything to go by. Raidric still served his role as the bastard traitor who sucked everyone around him dry. And he sure as hell put up a show to remember.
I hunger.
I guess it's no surprise that fans will take a huge liking to
the fun, crazy one,
and Walter really made his mark. This loony Wyvern Knight is one of Grado's generals who was once discharged for his corrupted behavior, but was later rehired under Leon's orders. He's an extreme threat demonstrated by how easily he tore into Seth. Yes, that Seth. And absolutely destroyed Glenn in a duel, who is supposed to be a general on par with him skill-wise. On top of being in charge of basically half of Grado's entire army, Walter really lets his psychotic tendencies loose. He takes his sweet time cornering Ephraim and lavish at his misery just for the sake of it. Also, he has a really odd obsession with Erica for some reason. Like, he's into her, but he also wants to kill her. Eat your heart up, Mirai Nikki, here's a superior Youngiri. He has certainly done his fair share of atrocities across Sacred Stones, killing for fun, framing Erica for Glenn's death and sending Cormac after her, but his most devastating accomplishment of all is that he looks like Tommy Wiseau.
You are tearing me apart!
Erica!
Walter is just a bag of joy in general. He's weird, he's vicious, and he gives us so much to look forward to as the game progresses. Few things in Fire Emblem are more thrilling than to watch this feely shield wearing mother effer squeal under his own demise. Geneaology of the Holy War. When the Jotgirl bad guys weren't doing evil shit out of some vaguely good intention, they'd be the ones taking big, irredeemable dumps all over the land. Such is the case with the Lopter clan's lord and savior, Julius. This unhinged little Satan child happens to be the inbred spawn of Arvis and Deidre. Yes, inbred, Jotgirl's pretty edgy in case you don't know. Julius's birth was set up by Manfroy to create the perfect vessel for the Dragon of Darkness, Lopter. So the kid grew up with a Satan dragon living in his bloodstreams. Whether he really was a good kid before he succumbed to his heritage, or was playing along with everyone else while secretly doing evil deeds, we don't know for sure, but hey, it's some food for thought. By the time his powers awaken, he does not hold back, stealing his father's throne, killing his mother, and subjecting the entire land to the cruel practice of child hunting. where he rallies children all over the land to make them his future slaves. Yeah, like I said, Jack Girl is pretty edgy. Despite this, he does have some earthly attachments, since he enjoys hanging out with Ishtar and partake in menial hobbies like killing people for sport. I mean, what else does a Dark Lord do in his spare time? I know what you're thinking. Isn't he just a brainwashed villain? Why is he so good if we don't even know if the stuff about him is real or not? Well, see, I don't mind brainwashed villains if it's woven well to the story. And there is one key reason why Julius works. How he embodies Arvis's failure. After all the terrible things Arvis did, killing Sigurd and his army, taking ties with Lapter, marrying Deidre knowing full well she lost her memory, and evaded finding out that she's his sister, all to raise to power yet doesn't do anything to deal with Jackgirl's actual problems despite claiming, "I'm the only one who can save the world." It's so cathartic to watch Julius destroy all of his hard work, crush his perfect life to pieces, and soil his good name for years to come. Ironic how the main villain will end up being the one to avenge the failed hero. Julius overall is a simple villain with mostly theoretical depth, but he serves as a fantastic cautionary on how badly someone's blind ego can screw them over, regardless of how good their intentions may be. Of course, that doesn't mean Julius himself is free of his father's habits. He did let Manfroy brainwash his sister instead of killing her, even though she's the only one who can wield the power that will defeat him. The hat doesn't fall far from the dunce now, does it? Now we're getting to the real can of whoop asses. In my opinion, the Thalia Saga has the best villain lineup in the entire series. Whether it's the minor or major villains, these guys play a huge part in making the Thalia's plots as juicy as we know it. To kick things off, we have the fan favorite Mad King Ashnard. When he was just a wee little prince, Ashnard did some pretty shady stuff to rise to power. Mainly tricking his father into signing a blood pact just so he can kill his family. It came at the cost of many lives in Dayan. But ultimately, he succeeded. From there on, he sets off to conquer the neighboring Crimea and saves the Black Knight, as well as his own draconic in-laws, to find Leren's medallion for him. Why does he want the medallion? Well, hearing the tales of the Dark God sealed inside, he plans to free the Dark God to set Thalias aflood. He wishes to destroy the current foundation of Thalias, all for the chance that life starts anew, where people are no longer oppressed by the system that builds them, but rather it's up to their own hands to carve their own destiny. The strong survives, and the weak submits to their will. That is his idea of peace. Wait, where have I seen this again?
I'm using war as a business to get elected! So I can end war as a business.
Okay, maybe Ashnard didn't quite have Armstrong levels of presence and performance, but he makes up for it with the sheer measures he went through. Marrying a dragon and abandoning their child for not having the powers he wanted, abusing his brother-in-law and turning him into a mount, and he even sustained corruption from holding Leren's medallion. Yeah, the same medallion that made Grail kill his wife, and it didn't affect Ashnard. If anything, it made him even stronger. Ashnard takes so much glee in everything he does that even his generals are too scared to take him out of the zone. He has no qualms mocking others for their weakness and disposition, and it shows considering he's one of the toughest final bosses in the whole series. He didn't even cry like a sore loser at the end. All he wanted was more. I will have to dock a few points from Ashnard though, since we never actually saw him conquer Crimea, which is kind of a big deal considering that's the call of adventure in Path of Radiance. Regardless, it's easy to see how Ashnard earned all his recognition. He goes far and out to be the fiercest Mad King the series has ever known, and we'll continue to remember him for that. Speaking of Thalia's villains with a heavy political drive, here comes another one. When it comes to evil Fire Emblem villains, none of them came even close to being as slimy and conniving as Lekan. As a character, Lekan is as straightforward as they come. An angry senator who worms around Backneon's politics to keep the Laguz slave trade going for the Senate's own benefits. But the measures he goes through to maintain that? Whoo man! He's been keeping the status quo of Laguz discrimination for decades, to the point where he assassinated his own empress so that she won't reveal herself to be a descendant of the Laguz. How did he get away with that? By pinning the blame on the innocent Heron tribe and rallying the people of Backneon to kill them all and burn down their forest.
What an asshole!
He then installed Sanaki and Saffron as superficial public figures so that they can distract the public from the Senate's busy work. Of course, when the two fought back against his operations, he uses his own follies against them by accusing Sanaki as a fake empress and jailing Saffron as a traitor. So he's a racist zealot who's guilty of slavery, slander, genocide, fraud, and multiple counts of treason. Clearly that's not enough, so let's add international conspiracy and blackmail into the mix. Even after the people of Dane wriggled out of Backneon's control, Lekan still managed to keep them at the palm of his hands by tricking their new king into signing his blood pact. And that's not the first time either. Even the Raven tribe has once signed a blood pact with Backneon, which also means Nesala had to take orders from Lekan and sabotage the rebellion army. Of course, despite his horrendous acts, Lekan's brilliance is only skin deep. He's full into believing that he's an apostle of Asherah during her awakening, only to be treated like a pawn in the end. And when the blackmail victims find out that they can exploit the blood pact by following Sanaki's orders instead, the foolish vice minister can only gulp to his demise. Lekan is a solid example of a devious politician who depends on the weaknesses of others to get what he wants. While he's not that complex, he's still a very realistic take on what happens when someone is allowed to abuse their position of power. And the fact that he managed to get away with so much for so long really shows that the people of Tellius need to get their act together if they don't want someone like him to take center stage again. We've been talking about a lot of cruel, unsympathetic baddies up to this point. I think it's high time we soften the blow with some actual sympathetic villains again. Although, depending on how you look at this guy, it might just hit harder. Leon has built a reputation of being one of Fire Emblem's most dramatic villains, and for good reason. While a lot of villains tend to exude a very strong presence right off the bat that gives you an impression of how much of a big deal they are, Leon is not that. He's Ephraim and Erica's close friend who enjoys their company as much as they enjoyed his. They hang out, study, and trade with each other, and it all seemed like things were all well and good. But despite this, Leon bears conflicting thoughts. He admired Ephraim's strength and confidence, and developed feelings for Erica due to the kindness she offered him. He felt inferior to them physically and mentally, which takes a huge burden on him as he is the Crown Prince of Grado. The complex stems further from dealing with the expectations to succeed his father Vagard as he is slowly dying. Nowhere left to lean on, Leon succumbed to the temptation to wield the dark stone containing the Demon King Fomortis. It finally gave him power at the cost of his sanity. He used this power to resurrect his father, and through further influence from Fomortis, he sets off to fulfill the monster's end of the deal, conquering the kingdoms of Macville, killing Ephraim and Erica's father, and destroying all the sacred stones to remove any chance of the Demon King being imprisoned. It seems as if the once kind Leon was gone, his soul consumed and his body no more than a flesh puppet. And if you do Erica's route, that might just be the case. It seemed the demon only used the guise of Leon to trick Erica and steal her sacred stone. But in Ephraim's route, there's a lot more to it. Leon reveals that he isn't fully controlled by the Demon King. His conflicting desires are exactly what led him to pursue this sort of power and go through with it. He's equally as terrified as Ephraim of what he became, but he still believes it has to be done because it's all he can do. This works especially well in dynamic with Ephraim, since this is the one instance where the strong, confident hero doesn't understand what's going on. This confrontation of wits and morals legitimately challenged Ephraim in a way that depresses him more than it excites him. And perhaps it's something for him to reflect on as he takes a step forward to restore his homeland later on. Leon sets a great example of how clever a confrontation of morals between hero and villain can really be, especially knowing how close he is to the two main characters. What seems like a boring setup for a main villain turned out to be one of the most realistic and gravitating portrayals that makes it so much more sad when you both ultimately have to go against each other. Personally, I do think it could have been handled better though. Leon not playing off of Erica more does feel like a huge missed opportunity to add layers to the dynamic. And I won't lie if I don't say that it does take me away from the investment of the character. But hey, maybe that's just me. Continue to love your underdog necromancer because he really is amazing. In my end, I just have bigger favorites. As you can tell by this point, not all these villains are inherently evil people. Some of them can be well-willing fellas who have done just as much good, if not more, than they do bad. Saffron, the ultimate mastermind of the Tellius series, is one of the kindest, most compassionate characters you'll ever come across in a Fire Emblem game. Let's start from the beginning because let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack with this guy. Centuries before the events of the Radiance games, Saffron, known then as Laren, was a Heron Laguz who aided the three heroes of Asherah. He helped seal the goddess of chaos Yune inside his medallion after she flooded Tellius out of panic. Since then, the four of them promised Asherah that they will maintain peace for 1,000 years before they awaken both her and Yune once again. If Yune is released before then, it's a sign that they failed to maintain peace, and Asherah will awaken to cast judgment. Saffron has since then worked tirelessly for centuries to absolve the ever-growing prejudice between the humans and Laguz tribes. But he can only do so much alone. Even one of his friends, the Dragon King Daginsea, refused to help him so as to not break the covenant. Eventually, he found hope in the form of his descendant, Empress Misaha of Bagnion. She planned to reveal her identity as a spawn of both human and Laguz to end the prejudice and show that the two races can coexist. Saffron thought he finally had his answer. But then, tragedy unveils. Lekan assassinated Misaha and framed the Heron tribe for it, leading to the Sirus massacre. Saffron, in despair of watching his own tribe be destroyed, desperately tried to quell it with his Galder. But no such miracle came. He lost everything that day. His family, his tribe, his faith in all life around him. Desperate, he since then plots to awaken Ashura to end the cycle of vice. When you first met Saffron in Path of Radiance, you notice how unnatural he seems. Not only is he blatantly mysterious, but for a pilgrim, his stats are crazy high. It's later revealed that he's the Prime Minister of Bagnion who's been scouting Tellius to report to Sanaki. In Radiant Dawn, he helped instigate the uprising in Dayan through the aid of his greatest ally, the Black Knight. He also appointed Naysala's help by sharing with him the secret of the Blood Pact so that he will save Sanaki and call off Bagnion's treachery against the rebellion of Gallia. This eventually led to the Bagnion Senate putting up Dane's forces against that of Gallia's to protect their own, leading to Lern's medallion acting up on all the chaos. Saffron's plan to break the covenant more or less came together. Chaos ensues, Ashura is awakened, and all of Tellius become petrified. What he didn't account for, however, is his last descendant Mekkah, singing the Galder of Rebirth to awaken Yune so she will aid the heroes to fight Ashura. When you finally face Saffron and expose him, he kinda just gave up. He knows that by the time they got this far, it's pretty much all over for him. Depending on which mode you play and how much story content you unlock, you could either put him out of his misery, or spare him and give him one last chance to make things right. Out of all the Fire Emblem villains, Saffron is, in my opinion, the most tragic one. His motive is depressingly grueling and it's hard to blame him for going as far as he did, given the effort he already invested into helping the people around him. And yet, even as he plans to pass the judgment to the world, he still can't let go of his attachments. He still loves Sanaki and Mekkah like his own daughters and won't so much as tread a hair on their heads. And the surviving Herons? He just asks them to return to the forest and avoid the war. For a character that doesn't appear much in the story, Saffron left such a massive impact thanks to his incredible background and unique personality. Few characters are able to pull off that sort of presence, and I really gotta hand it to the good man. Granted, you do have to go through specific requirements to unlock most of Saffron's backstory. Honestly, just watch a YouTube video of it. But the story is so good, I don't really care. The series has shown multiple times how good a villain's backstory can be to the point where it elevates them from decent to amazing. While I still prefer more direct villains with ample screen time, I will always have a soft spot for the majestic father of the Herons. I know I've gone on about not being the biggest fan of villains that are either manipulated or brainwashed, and it's not that I don't like them at all, I just don't like it when the story acts like they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions just because there's a bigger, badder mastermind that made them do it. Instead of challenging you to look at two sides of the same coin, you're just expected to blame one guy for every bad thing that happened. Thank goodness Zephiel is more complex than that. Zephiel is a vengeful king who seeks to destroy all of Ilibe with the help of the dark dragon Idun, all so that he can subdue mankind's rule and return its rights to the dragons they once sealed away. First of all, just look at Zephiel. He is a big man with a giant electric sword and he knows how to put it to use. He casually destroys an ally general one-on-one and is one of the few adversaries who can still pose a challenge against a promoted Roy. People like to make fun of how wimpy he is in FE7, but don't believe everything a jaded elitist tells you. Even with low stats and a toothpick, Zephiel can still put up a fight to keep himself safe, which certainly puts him above most hostages in the series. His character? Cold and calculating, but not without its bases and merits. Zephiel's heart was severely tainted by how abusive his father was to him, tormenting him his whole life just because his birthright did not meet his father's liking. No matter how hard Zephiel worked to please his father, there's no wiping the hatred. Being reviled and threatened time and time again, the once kind prince has had enough and killed his father with the help of his aide. Zephiel has since then grown to despise the humans around him for their hateful and selfish upbringing, and sees to it that only dragons rule. To him, even a land ruled by beasts won't be better than one ruled by traitors and murderers. And the crazy part is, he's kind of right. Throughout Binding Blade, we see how many knights and ministers from the various nations betray their own kingdom just to side with Byrne. They may be a select few people, but they're all it took to throw their respective nations out of loop. Between the self-fulfilling prophecy and the lack of respect for his generals, Zephiel really come across as a massive asshole. And yeah, I get where he's coming from. His entire childhood is repeatedly stepped on by a stupid father and a psychotic mother, and by the time his mother gets better and tries to make amends, she dies. His sister may have been there for him, but even she isn't quite enough to erase the trauma he went through. But it's still his decision to turn against mankind and neglect the compassion his sister offered him. The fact that he still loves Guinevere enough to let her live shows that he's not all monster. But that doesn't change the fact that he's still a threat who must be neutralized at all costs. And maybe this is just me, but I kinda prefer holding both the cause and the effect accountable rather than dumb it down to just, oh, this person who destroyed our lives is just a victim all along. Let's all forgive them and sing stories of how heroic they actually are. Zephiel has all the cards to be a fantastic villain. Threatening presence, heavy backstory, and savagery that will make even Ashnard tell him to chill the F up. He's not blackmailed or controlled by some stupid evil wizard. His entire plan was his own design, and that's why he'll continue to be one of Fire Emblem's best villains. Geneaology really likes to push moral ambiguity in its narrative, doesn't it? What with the if you must hate the evil, not the individual thing they're trying to push? Too bad the characters are either too stupid or too cruel for that to work. Okay, to be fair, this is a pretty old game. It didn't have as much luxury to portray visually enchanting character development as something like Three Houses. Then again, Three Houses isn't spotless either. That said, there is one villain in the game that does the Grey debacle right. Allow me to present to you one of the most badass, complex, and intriguing villains in the entire series, Travant! As the king of Southern Thracia, Travant leads a band of sellswords wherever he goes and kills people for bounty since it's the only way he can feed his people. Think of him as the mama bird to Thracia's big dry bird nest. The man has done some pretty immoral things to get his way, including helping other dictators, killing Sigurd's sister and brother-in-law for their sacred loot, holding his own people hostage to threaten his generals into fighting for him, and initiating a giant conspiracy to seize North Thracia. Now, just why the hell did he have to do all of that? Sure, he's gotta make a living, but why not just do things peacefully? Well, he can't. South Thracia has gone through decades of discrimination due to its royal lineage living as pillagers and murderers their whole life. Travant is stuck within this cycle and is in no position to set things right. That said, he does show incentive to do what must be done to make things better. Now, some might say he's just a carbon copy of Arvis, but the key difference between the two is that Travant is actually smart. He knows when to dip out of an unwinnable fight and still keep his bounty, which even comes in handy when he leaves King Bloom for dead to open up his chances of retaking North Thracia. There's also the 8 Massacre, where Travant takes advantage of Quan and Ethlyn planting their horses into the desert in order to ambush them. Seriously, how does a gifted knight like Quan not know he shouldn't bring horses into the desert? Even Sigurd has foot units. And then of course, there's Quan's daughter Altina, whom Travant abducted so he could raise her to be a diplomat of Leonster fighting for his cause. Again, why Ethlyn thinks it's a good idea to bring her 3-year-old into a battlefield, I don't know, these two are too stupid to feel sorry for, moving on. Having Altina by his side became a pretty vital backup plan for him, considering Raidric would later betray him and rob him off of his chance to seize North Thracia firsthand. On top of being a conniving strategist, Travant nurtured his children well. Arion and Altina grew up as powerful soldiers who are loyal to his cause, but not so stupid that they don't recognize what kind of person their father is. War is hell, as he says. And even after Altina recognized his crimes and defected from Thracia, she still understood his outlook and respects him for what he's done for her. It shows too with how polite and respectful Arion is in contrast to his father, yet Travant hardly takes issue with it. If anything, he encourages Arion to branch out from following him altogether. Travant may be harsh, but he doesn't force his views on his kids as he believes it's this sort of nurturing that can bring South Thracia out of its dark age. Travant is not sympathetic by any means, and he doesn't even try to hide it. He's aware he's destined to become a villain in the eyes of history and embraces it to his dying breath. But to say nothing of his efforts to pave a better future for Thracia will be a disservice. Hate him as we may, but man do I respect his dedication. I poke at how clumsy Judgirl is, but Travant is easily where the writing shines. And no, I will not acknowledge what Velt said about tipping off Travant. Nobody likes Velt and he doesn't earn his right to retcon the plot to his will. Fuck off. You might have noticed that I still have yet to talk about the Dark Wizard Mastermind archetype past Garnet. And if you know anything about these guys, you probably know why. For villains that serve as the most common central antagonists, they don't offer much investments as characters. They're often the cruel puppet master who dedicates their entire character to serving the big endgame monster, which makes them lack individuality. Yes, like the Hardens and Chemists, there's a right and wrong way to handle it, but even compared to those two, one of these guys rarely stand out over the other. However, there is one wizardly puppet master in the series who managed to make his own stand and perform spectacularly. The Lord of the Morphs, Nurgle. There once was a curious scholar who traveled to the city of Arcadia with an old friend. He came to search for knowledge to unlock the Dragon's Gate. In his journey, he discovers the power of the quintessence, dark magic fueled by the essence of life. It is with this magic that the scholar became consumed by power and had to be exiled from Arcadia by the hands of his own friend. Nurgle is a pretty divisive villain. On the surface, he just seems like your typical power-hungry bad guy who takes charge of the crimes going on in Elibe through the actions of his morphs. All he wanted is to harvest quintessence from the people so that he can open the Dragon's Gate and harvest even more quintessence from the dragons. This doesn't sit well with people who wanted villains with more
complex motives.
But those who can get past that can enjoy other aspects of Nurgle as well. For one, his design. Contrary to the overcooked old man look, Nurgle is badass. The sleek robe and the black turban really adds to his style, which is even more prevalent given how it hides his freaky scarred eye. Easily one of the series' best villain designs in my opinion. He's not just all style either, he's a legitimate threat. His morphs have killed and harvested the lives of people good and bad. He's done a lot to come that far with his experiments, including using Ronald's friend Kishuna as a test subject, effectively ruining his life and turning him into a magic seal. Adding on, he's one of the few villains who managed to use his failures to his advantage. When he failed to use Ninian to open the Dragon's Gate, he left her to her own self, turning into a dragon only to be killed by Eliwood. With Ninian's quintessence, he became strong enough to unlock the Dragon's Gate by himself. Not even his old friend Athos could scratch him the same way he used to all those years ago. So yeah, he's a cruel and conniving villain, and for some people that's good enough. But others can't help to question, why did all of this matter to him? Is power really all he cares about? If Athos claimed that he was a good man back then, surely there's more to him than meets the eye. Well, y'all better sit tight, because this is where things are about to get spicy. Hidden within a glimpse in time lies the truth behind the sorcerer's motives. Nurgle wasn't always a man crazy for power. He was instead crazy for love. Wedding the ice dragon Einar, they had two children, Ninian and Nils. As a result of the war between man and dragon, Nurgle took his children to safety. He sets off to save his wife, but asks the children if he doesn't return in due time, they should escape to the Dragon's Gate. He promised them that no matter what, he will come back for them. Alas, for a human, it takes great power to access the Dragon's Gate. Nurgle did his best to master dark magic, to become one with the power he wields so that he can meet his children again. But without the strength and knowledge to tame the magic, he became lost. His memory was purged, and all he remembered are remnants of his motives. Why did he wish to open the Dragon's Gate? Even he doesn't know. All he knows is that it meant something to him. Harnessing the quintessence, he believed it was his destiny to master it. And what tied him to the dragons? To take their power for himself. Nurgle did eventually meet his children, but they don't even remember each other. Nurgle only saw them as tools to obtain more power, while Nils and Ninian only saw him as a monster with the voice of an old friend. As Nurgle dies, he reminisces over the buried memories that he couldn't understand, and even Nils can't help but to shed a tear despite not knowing why. Holy shit! Not only is Nurgle's past insanely tragic, but it opens up a whole separate avenue of what his character really meant. A victim of self-obligation who sacrificed all that he had to save those he held dear to him, only for it to backfire in his face, and he's not even mentally conscious to see it happen. Knowing all of this, seeing him abuse Nils and Ninian felt so much more sad and painful. I think one of my favorite things about this is that we actually get to see what it means for someone to wield dark magic. Oftentimes, dark magic in the series is just seen as magic but evil. Not often do we see it portrayed as the otherworldly corrupting magic that it's meant to be, lest it came from some evil entity pulling the strings. Nurgle's story really does capture the dangers of darkness as an element, and it portrays a more humane tale of temptation that these evil wizards tend to lack. Some people might have their own nitpicks about it, like how the backstory should have been more accessible instead of locked behind a grueling Gaiden chapter. Again, just watch a YouTube video of it. And how it's too detached from the main story to matter all too much. But for me, treating it as a mystery is part of what made it so special. He's an enigma. The heroes don't know him for who he really is, and they fear him for it. Whether it's an imposing villain or a victim of misguidance, Nurgle is a character that keeps me intrigued time and time again. Nostalgia bias might play a part in my love for him, but I truly do appreciate what he brought into the table as one of the series' most unique villains. Unless any upcoming Fire Emblem tales have anything to say about it, I doubt that's changing anytime soon. Alright, before we get to number 1, let's list down some honorable mentions. Eremiah, new mystery of the emblem, a serene caretaker with a savage tongue. Kinda spicy. Jeddah, Gaiden/Echoes, a dark bishop who's actually well written. Don't get used to it. Arvis, Gen of the Holy War. I can't believe keeping an evil cult alive for a decade was a bad idea. Kemph, Thracia 776.
I don't hate women!
Kinda seems like you do.
Narshan, Binding Blade, has neither style nor grace, only a punchable face. Ursula, Blazing Sword, Blackfang's mischievous and deadly blue crow. Also, not gonna lie, I kinda had a childhood crush on her. Kalex, Sacred Stones. Joshua's best friend is also his worst enemy. Oliver, the Talia Saga. Not even death could phase this immortal specimen of beauty. Jarrett, Radiant Dawn. When the generic soldier managed to destroy a whole nation on his own. Ashura, also from Radiant Dawn. A final boss with a deep story and a good fight? Could have fooled me.
Will you survive?
The Black Knight. Hands down, the most popular villain in Fire Emblem's whole catalog, and for very good reasons. I mean, just look at him! The radiant black armor coupled with a fearsome build, gallant red cape, and a massive legendary sword. His mere presence screams formidable. Not only is he incredibly strong and durable, but despite his appearance, he's also very agile. In Path of Radiance, every time he appears on the map, all you can do is run. Not a single ally unit can take him on except a fully powered Ike with Ragnell. He's even crazier in Radiant Dawn, and you get the front seat to witnessing his power as he is the strongest unit you can play as, absolutely sweeping through the rest of Micaiah's story. But he won't be atop the list if all he's got going for him is strength. His character is equally as amazing. The Black Knight sought nothing more than to battle his equal. Whether he is serving Ashnard as one of Dain's 4 riders, or taking orders from Saffron, he will always find an opportunity to challenge Ike's father Grail. Disappointed to see Grail handicap himself, the Black Knight turned to Ike as his budding adversary. He'll see to it that someday, they will be able to have the decisive battle he always yearned for. The Knight will taunt and threaten his enemies, play with their emotions and tear into their weaknesses, all in pursuit of seeing his goal through. He will not let personal feelings or political dribble get in his way. He killed Grail, will massacre anyone who stands in his way, and even killed an innocent Hawk Lagoose just to abduct Leanne. Yeah, I don't think Saffron will take kindly to that, Zelgius. So what exactly caused this deep desire for battle? Well, the Black Knight was once a soldier in service of Dain who came from a life of discrimination due to being a branded. The sole passion he had in life is to fight, which is inspired by his admiration for Grail as his former superior. He's grateful to Saffron for giving him a purpose as his second-in-command and a position among Beknion's greatest. But in the end, it's all but a ruse to end the world, so even Saffron won't stop the Knight from achieving what he wanted if it satisfies him in return. Now, some might call bullshit on me saying this, since as a general of Beknion, Zelgius appears to be a pretty sincere and noble guy who does everything he can in service of the nation. If anything, the Black Knight was just a mask he put on. But really, given how much his desire for battle is intertwined to his core values, and the grueling lengths he goes through to see to it that his life's mission is achieved, I'm convinced the Black Knight is who he really is, and Zelgius is the public mask. Darth Vader of Fire Emblem? More like the Batman of Fire Emblem. Well, reverse Batman anyway. That's not to say there's no good in him deep down, of course. He still retreats when Elincia disarms herself and is willing to put his life on the line to protect Saffron. Behind that battle-hungry nature, there is still a true knight. And after everything he's done, Black Knight achieved exactly what he wanted. Ike became strong enough to match him in a fight to the death, which in return, made him the hero who will defeat Ashura, fulfilling the knight's mission to fight someone whose strength is truly his equal, or possibly even more so. The Black Knight is far from the most complex or tragic villain in the series, but I don't really care because he's just fun. He balances out all the aspects that makes a villain amazing. He's interesting, fantastically written, badass as all hell, and is always exciting to anticipate in my journeys across Tellius. And that, in my opinion, is what makes him the greatest villain in all of Fire Emblem.